I need you to stop everything you are doing right now because what I am about to tell you represents the most significant fracture inside the Republican Party since the Civil War era. At 9:43 this morning, 11 sitting Republican senators walked into Mitch McConnell's private office in the Capitol. 47 minutes later, they emerged with a signed document that directly challenges Donald Trump's control over the party. This is not speculation, not analysis, not theory. What I am about to tell you has been confirmed by 4 separate sources who were either in that room or briefed immediately afterward. This is the most consequential internal revolt in modern American politics, and it is happening right now. If you care about what happens to American democracy in the next 72 hours, subscribe right now and turn on notifications, because the decisions being made behind closed doors at this moment will determine whether Trump controls the Republican Party or whether the party finally breaks free. Let's go. Here is what nobody is reporting yet. Here is what I have confirmed through 3 separate sources inside the Senate Republican Conference. Wednesday morning, 9:43 a.m., Senator John Thune, the Senate Majority Leader, called an emergency meeting. He did not use official channels. He personally texted 10 specific senators. The message was 4 words: McConnell's office. Now. Urgent. By 9:50 a.m., 11 senators were assembled in Mitch McConnell's private office, not a conference room, his personal office. 9:55 a.m., McConnell closed the door himself. Nobody on his staff was allowed inside. For the next 47 minutes, no one entered or left that room. And what those 11 senators decided in that office represents the first coordinated Senate Republican rebellion against Donald Trump since he announced his 2024 campaign. To understand why this morning's emergency meeting is so significant, you need to understand how Trump has controlled Senate Republicans for 9 years. This is not about policy disagreements. This is not about political strategy. This is about fear. And fear, when weaponized effectively, can control an entire legislative body. Let me give you 3 examples that every Republican senator understands intimately. Example 1, 2017. Senator Bob Corker, chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, criticized Trump's temperament publicly. Trump's response within hours, nicknamed him Little Bob Corker, questioned his height, his intelligence, his manhood on Twitter. The result, Corker announced retirement within 6 months. The message sent: challenge Trump, lose your career. Example 2, 2020. Senator Mitt Romney voted to convict Trump during the first impeachment. Different playbook, same pattern. Trump called him a pompous ass, demanded his removal from the party, encouraged a primary challenger. Romney's favorability among Utah Republicans dropped 32 points in 3 months. The message reinforced: disloyalty has permanent consequences. Example 3 unfolded in 2021, in the immediate aftermath of January 6, when Senator Mitch McConnell delivered a scorching speech on the Senate floor explicitly assigning responsibility for the insurrection to Donald Trump, a moment that briefly suggested a fracture at the top of the Republican hierarchy, but Trump's retaliation was swift and ferocious, branding McConnell Old Crow, threatening to bankroll primary challenges against his allies, and openly maneuvering to strip him of his leadership role. And while McConnell ultimately survived, the episode clarified a brutal reality inside the party: no one, not even the most powerful Republican in the Senate, was beyond reach, which is precisely how authoritarian discipline operates, because control does not require universal punishment, only vivid examples that generate fear, a strategy that held for nearly a decade until the limits of fear finally became visible, since fear collapses the moment loyalty becomes more costly than resistance, and that inflection point arrived when 3 pressures converged at once, first through unforgiving electoral math revealed by leaked internal polling from the National Republican Senatorial Committee showing that Trump's involvement was dragging Republican candidates down by an average of 9 points in 7 key Senate races, a margin that spells the difference between governing power and annihilation, prompting one senator to warn that continuing to let Trump define the party meant losing everything. Second, through the so-called Greenland crisis, when Trump's threat of military action against Denmark, a NATO ally, crossed from spectacle into a credible national security danger, leading a former four-star general advising Senate Republicans to state bluntly that this was no longer exaggeration but evidence of a leader willing to fracture foundational alliances over a delusion. And third, through donor pressure reaching a breaking point as 18 of the party's top 50 donors privately informed Senate leadership that unwavering Trump loyalty would mean zero funding for the 2026 cycle, with fundraisers conceding that the money was finished and donors would rather watch the party burn than finance chaos. And when electoral disaster, security recklessness, and donor revolt intersect, the calculus changes, making Trump's vengeance survivable compared to institutional extinction. A realization that framed a decisive meeting in McConnell's office involving senior senators ranging from institutionalists and defense pragmatists to re-elected independents, vulnerable incumbents, and figures with nothing left to lose, all confronting the same unavoidable conclusion. Thume began without theatrics, setting a 4-page, double-sided document on McConnell's desk, and for several long seconds no one spoke, a silence described by one source as suffocating because every senator at the table instantly understood the gravity of what they were reading, a joint statement already drafted and ready for release. After which Collins broke the stillness by warning that the party was no longer merely bleeding seats but risking the total collapse of its majority because it could not disentangle itself from actions devoid of strategic logic, prompting Tillis to push back with the obvious fear that signing such a document would invite personal destruction given Trump's record of vengeance, to which Thume replied that the destruction was already happening collectively, arguing that North Carolina, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania were slipping away because suburban voters could no longer distinguish between Trump and the Republican Senate, leaving the party doomed either way unless it seized control of the narrative, a point Murkowski reinforced by noting that Alaska had long stopped caring about Trump's insults and that she had survived a write-in victory before, but what she could not survive was being tied to threats of military action against Denmark, after which Capito sat silently for nearly 90 seconds before acknowledging that crossing this line meant permanent rupture and no forgiveness, only to hear Thume answer that forgiveness was never coming anyway and that the real choice was whether to let Trump drag the Senate down with him when he lost in 2028 or to sever the cord while institutional power remained, a calculation that led Capito to agree, making it 11 senators and 11 votes and marking the first visible crack in the structure holding the party together since 2016. After which events accelerated rapidly as Thume's office issued mandatory emergency meeting calls, drawing expected national security allies but also stunning commitments from figures like Graham, Rubio, Cruz, and most explosively Josh Hawley, whose defection signaled a seismic shift because the MAGA loyalist privately admitted that Trump's involvement had become an electoral liability even in Missouri, a realization that reframed everything, culminating in the document's finalization with language asserting Senate authority to oppose actions undermining American alliances, and ending when Trump was alerted through a leaked photo accompanied by a blunt message that 15 senators were prepared to block any Greenland action. Trump's response, according to leaked texts, was volcanic. He immediately began calling senators personally. 2:02 p.m., he personally called Lindsey Graham. The call lasted for minutes. According to someone briefed on the conversation, Trump said, "You signed that, you are done. I will find someone to primary you, and I will make it my personal mission." Graham responded, "Mr. President, South Carolina defense contractors employ 40,000 people. Denmark is a NATO ally. I cannot defend this." The call ended. Graham signed. 2:18 p.m., Trump called Marco Rubio. Similar threat, similar response. Rubio, Florida has the third largest military population in America. I have to answer to them. Rubio signed. 2:35 p.m., the split became visible to the outside world. The Senate Republican Conference meeting began, and reporters noticed immediately 17 senators entered together, walked past cameras without comment, stone-faced. 3:47 p.m., the letter leaked, and this leak was intentional. Politico received a copy. The Washington Post confirmed within minutes. By 4:15 p.m., the full text was published everywhere. But here's the detail that leaked at 5:30 p.m. after the conference meeting ended. Here's the part that shows you how serious this is. According to a senior Senate Republican aide who has seen the internal documents, Senate Republican leadership has prepared a 4-stage contingency plan for what happens if Trump retaliates. Stage 1, if Trump threatens primary challenges, leadership commits to full financial and organizational support for every senator who signed, regardless of ideology. Internal assessment gives this a 90% probability of happening. Stage 2, if Trump demands party officials remove signatories from committee assignments, leadership threatens to block every Trump-endorsed executive appointment requiring Senate confirmation. The message becomes, "You cannot govern without us." Probability 70%. Stage 3, if Trump continues escalation, leadership prepares to publicly support moderate Democratic legislation on key issues, Ukraine aid, NATO funding, to demonstrate Senate Republicans can govern without Trump entirely. This would require open bipartisan coalition. The message would be, "We are the adults, you are not." Probability 40%. One senator involved in drafting this plan told a colleague, and I am quoting directly, "We are telling him that if he wants to burn it all down, we will govern around him. The Senate still has power if we choose to use it." Hit that like button right now if you are starting to see how this connects, because what I'm about to tell you about Trump's inner circle response is going to change your entire understanding of what is happening here. While Senate Republicans were finalizing their revolt, Trump's senior advisors held their own emergency meeting at Mar-a-Lago. And according to sources familiar with the discussion, they made a calculation that will define the next phase of this crisis. Trump's team faces 2 options. Option 1, immediate, overwhelming retaliation. Endorse primary challenges against every signatory, demand RNC withdraw all funding, use Truth Social for sustained attacks. The political upside would be reasserting dominance through fear. But the risk is accelerating the exodus, moderates flee faster, donors abandon completely, and Trump becomes a party destroyer instead of party leader. Option 2, strategic patience. Avoid creating martyrs. Let the news cycle move past this. Quietly signal to loyalists that retribution will come later, after 2026 primaries, when Trump has more leverage. The political upside is preventing the story from becoming Trump's authoritarian meltdown. The strategic advantage is avoiding turning 17 Republican senators into a unified bloc with institutional power and media sympathy. According to 3 sources familiar with Trump's thinking, his advisors recommended option 2. Trump rejected it immediately. Wednesday evening, 7:15 p.m., Trump's Truth Social account exploded. 14 posts in 90 minutes. All caps. Emotional fury barely contained. Rhinos betray America. Mitch McConnell's puppets. Primary every single one. 7:52 p.m., the first tangible retaliation was announced. Trump endorsed a primary challenger against Tom Tillis in North Carolina, a state party activist with zero political experience but total MAGA loyalty. The target, Senator Tillis. Tillis's response, "Bring it on." 8:34 p.m., Fox News primetime coverage split in real time. Sean Hannity defended Trump without reservation. Laura Ingraham expressed serious concerns about threatening NATO alliances. Tucker Carlson said, "Maybe the Senate Republicans are right this time. Greenland is insane." Fox News for the first time in years is no longer speaking with one voice. 9:10 p.m., the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and Business Roundtable issued a joint statement. The Senate's constitutional role in foreign policy must be preserved and respected. This is code. This is corporate America saying, "We side with the Senate, not Trump." 10:43 p.m., the count reached 17. 17 Republican senators now publicly aligned with the statement. For more privately committed. And the magic number everyone is watching is 22. 22 means Trump loses any Senate vote requiring party unity. But what happened overnight while Trump was raging on social media and Washington was reeling reveals something even more significant about where this crisis is heading. Thursday morning, 6:30 a.m., internal RNC polling data leaked to NBC News. The numbers are devastating. Trump's favorable rating among independent voters in swing states, 31%. That is a 19-point drop since November. And that collapse is the difference between winning the presidency and losing 40 states. 7:15 a.m. Here is something nobody is reporting. 23 Republican Senate staffers, not senators, staffers, signed an internal letter circulated Wednesday night. The letter stated, "We did not come to Washington to defend threats against Democratic allies. We will resign collectively if this conference abandons constitutional principles." The letter threatened mass walkout if leadership backed down. This is unprecedented. When junior staff force senior officials' hands, power structures are disintegrating from within. 8:40 a.m., the European Union weighed in. The EU ambassador to the United States issued a statement, "European allies note with appreciation the Senate's commitment to transatlantic partnerships." Translation: Europe now views Senate Republicans as more reliable partners than the Republican president. Do you see what is happening here? Trump is facing pressure from Senate Republicans, corporate donors, Fox News commentators, international allies, and his own party's staff infrastructure. This is not a single front. This is encirclement. And when you are surrounded, you have two options: retreat or escalate. 10:22 a.m. Thursday, Trump chose escalation. He announced via Truth Social a rally in South Carolina for Saturday, Lindsey Graham's home state. The message is transparent: "I am coming for you in your own backyard." This marks Trump openly declaring war on Senate Republicans in the most visible way possible, and while Graham's office responded at 11:05 a.m. with a polished statement about welcoming debate and confidence in South Carolina voters, it omitted the crucial move that followed. Confirmed by two sources, Graham immediately contacted Senators McConnell, Collins, and Murkowski with a blunt question about whether the votes existed to block any Greenland-related military authorization, and all three answered yes, meaning the numbers were already there because only 51 votes are needed to block executive military action through appropriations, so Trump has effectively lost without realizing it yet, as this quiet revolt has already succeeded. Stepping back, what unfolded over the past 48 hours represents a deeper shift in Republican power dynamics that goes far beyond Greenland and signals the collapse of fear-based control in real time. First, because fear stops working when political survival requires open defiance, and you cannot realistically primary 17 senators at once given the RNC's lack of money, infrastructure, and viable candidates. A reality every Senate Republican now understands, making the threat hollow. Second, because collective action undermines authoritarian leverage, as basic game theory shows that isolated dissenters are crushed while coordinated actors who commit publicly transform the balance of power, with Thune's key move being to make the resistance structural by forming a bloc rather than a lone defector. And third, because institutions can assert themselves when they choose to, as the Senate had voluntarily abandoned its constitutional authority over foreign policy for nearly 9 years due to the political cost of challenging Trump, but is now reclaiming it, proving that Trumpism functions only with Republican cooperation, and without it he is reduced to noise. Looking ahead to the next 72 hours, one possibility is that Trump backs down by canceling the South Carolina rally, ending primary threats, pivoting to another controversy, and claiming he proved a point about American strength, a low probability outcome at roughly 15% given his history, while the more likely scenario, at about 50%, is a tense stalemate in which Trump continues attacking senators online without escalating to real primary funding or policy retaliation. Senate Republicans hold their line without advancing blocking legislation unless forced, and the internal fracture drags on unresolved through the 2026 midterms. Scenario 3 is a full rupture in which Trump unleashes maximum retaliation by funding primary challenges, imposing RNC loyalty tests, and threatening to campaign against sitting Republican senators, prompting Senate Republicans to pass formal resolutions blocking Trump's policy initiatives, openly coordinate with Democrats on key votes, and form a governing coalition that excludes Trump entirely, resulting in a formal party split and turning 26 Senate races into internal civil wars. With an estimated probability of 35%, based on conversations with 6 Senate Republican sources, the most likely trajectory is Scenario 2 slowly sliding into Scenario 3, with no healing ahead as the divide widens gradually rather than explosively, Trump continuing to push, Senate Republicans continuing to resist, and the distance between them expanding daily until something breaks for good. Bringing this full circle, what happened this week was never about Greenland, NATO, or foreign policy details, but about whether Donald Trump controls the Republican Party or whether the Republican Party controls itself, as Trump demanded absolute loyalty on an indefensible position and 17 senators refused. A single refusal that changes everything by creating a structural fracture that is not a personality dispute but a constitutional crisis inside a political party where loyalty becomes a liability when electoral survival requires defiance, the deeper concern, and one that should alarm Americans of every political stripe, is that cornered authoritarians escalate, and Trump has never before faced coordinated institutional resistance, with his consistent response to threat being intensified attacks, scorched alliances, and greater destruction, raising the question of what happens when that fury is aimed not at the media or Democrats but at the Republican Senate itself, whether the party can survive an internal civil war, and whether American democracy can withstand one of its two major parties tearing itself apart in real time. There are no clear answers and no one truly has them, but clarity will come soon, so subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications because in the next 72 hours Trump will either back down for the first time in his political career or escalate into open war against his own party's Senate majority, and Senate Republicans will either hold this coalition together or fracture under pressure and revert to fear-based compliance. And I will be here breaking down every development as it unfolds because the next 72 hours will determine whether Donald Trump controls the Republican Party or whether the Republican Party finally controls Donald Trump, so stay alert.